Many actors are superstitious. Some even claim supernatural powers. But few are obsessed with the paranormal, the way Peter Sellers was.
He was fascinated by the occult and with spiritualism and clairvoyancy. To Peter, it was real.
He was just prone to anything to do with the hard to believe.
He died a lonely boy. He was always looking for something that was not there.
By the mid-60s, Peter Sellers was an international superstar. He lived a life of excess in a charismatic decade. Sellers partied with the Beatles and took royalty to seances. Like many of his contemporaries, he never let a spiritual bandwagon pass him by.
He was very much part of that age of Aquarius, overindulgence in the sherbets, you know, and the magic potions and the magic mushrooms and all that.
He went into a kind of insane superstardom mode of trying every fad going, every drug going. He was very promiscuous. He kind of lost his way.
Sellers was always keen to embrace the new and the strange. He was well suited to a profession steeped in superstition and would eagerly pick up oddball ideas from those around him.
Peter O'Toole has a superstition about green. Suddenly, I think after he'd made a film with Peter O'Toole, Peter Sellers had an obsession with the colour green.
Bring it up at the next group analysis meeting, something like that. Not now!
He was very keen, Peter, to learn new superstitions. And I remember telling him in Paris that my father and Wilfrid Hyde White had got a superstition whereby if they saw two nuns in the street, you had to walk between them. So this could be quite tricky if they were, for instance, maybe sharing the weight of a shopping thing. But he loved that. He thought it was really good. I'm going to try that, he said.
If he was filming and you went on the set in wearing something purple, that would be the end of the day. I mean, he couldn't possibly go on filming because somebody had come in wearing purple.
You should never leave keys on the table. Never leave a bunch of keys on the table. That was bad luck.
If a friend gives you a pointed gift, you must give them a penny. His superstitions had more than their fair share of influence on his life. I don't think it prevented him particularly. It was an excuse when it suited him. It allowed him to be, to misbehave in one way, you know. Oh, well, it's because he's superstitious. Oh, well, in that case, it's okay.
I think people who are deeply superstitious, as Peter Sellers was, it's a question of not feeling in control of yourself or of anything else. Therefore, you have to litter your life with talismans in order to make yourself feel somehow that you're keeping the very unsafe world at bay.
Behind this superstitious facade lay a deeply insecure man who spent his life searching for the means of controlling everything and everyone around him. His superstitions were only part of a much darker inner journey that began early in his career. Peter Sellers first made his name in the late 40s with The Goon Show.
May I welcome you to The Goon Show and introduce you to The Goons!
Formed alongside Spike Milligan, Harry Seacombe and Michael Bentine, the Goons were a comic response to the war.
What they were doing in The Goon Show was reliving comically the war which they'd all just been through for real. So the Goons are full of explosions and gunfire and murder and mayhem.
Is he dead? I think so. Oh, hadn't you better make sure? All right, just a minute.
Few were left untouched by the war. Britain was a nation still grieving for its dead. As in the First War, many people turned to spiritualism as a means of contacting their lost ones.
I think the tremendous, overwhelming loss, particularly in the First War, but also in the Second War, led to a rise of interest in going to seances and going to spiritualists because people could not cope, not only with their own loss, but the generalised sense of loss.
Think of the people in the war who didn't know how they died, and they got the news. And I think there is an enormous curiosity about what happened to them and how it happened to them.
Peter Sellers was the only goon not to have confronted death directly during the war. But he was always impressed by the stories of those who had. Michael Benteen had been a debriefing officer in the RAF, where he claimed to have had premonitions about the fate of returning air crews.
Michael told us all that as each man came in, one would come in and look like a skeleton to me. So he was either dead, Joey. He said either dead or he was a ghost. He said I was seeing a ghost. Or else I would mark him down, he was going to die on the next raid. But I never told any of the chaps that, but I could tell whether they were going to come through it alive or not.
Benteen had grown up surrounded by psychics. Seances were commonplace, and he was a passionate advocate for the paranormal.
Peter Sellers came under people's influence, people that he admired, and he was deeply impressed in the early days by Michael Benteen. And Benteen was probably the first person to put the idea into Sellers' head that there was something here, something worth checking out.
The spirit world that Benteen introduced him to became a lifelong obsession for Sellers. His early experiences with seances and mediums captivated him and began to inform his whole approach to acting.
It's like being a medium and laying yourself open and saying, I want a certain character to inhabit my body, or a spirit to take charge of me.
Sellers did become these people that he played, and it was this strange spiritualism going on in him as he was possessed by the soul of these various characters. It's a bit like when Barry Humphries is Dame Edna. I mean, it's demonic possession. It's not really acting.
Certainly with Peter, he quite often would hold on to the character between takes, and he would, for instance, carry on using the accent or in the position. And other times, particularly when he was corpsing, it was obvious that the character hadn't possessed him enough.
Out of character and away from the camera, Sellers was often seen as a hollow man, waiting for the next role that would bring him back to life.
He used to say there isn't a real Peter Sellers. I had it surgically removed, you know. And in a way, everything was a part. He didn't do a very good father. He did a very good angry man. He was lost in himself, I think, because he didn't. There wasn't, you know, when you turned him off, there wasn't anything there.
Anyone that he got close to, he would steal from. And that, in the end, was the sum total of Peter Sellers, a collection of small parts from other people.
Influenced by friends in his spiritualist circles, Sellers started exploring other areas of the paranormal and developed a consuming interest in astrology.
I know that he did spend a lot of time and money getting daily horoscopes. A lot of his intimates, you know, his sort of agents and secretaries and stuff like that, were sent off to, this was in the days before fax, was sent off to get the latest document each day to tell him how to organise his day.
There was a time, I remember, we were going down to Twickenham Studios, and he'd had a bad experience the night before, and the horoscopes weren't conducive to a good day. And he said, stop at the phone box, give them a ring, tell them I can't make it today, I'm not well.
Sellers was building a promising career, but in an industry where success was impossible to predict. The more he tried to take control of the future, the more it took control of him. the highly suggestible Sellers was about to meet the man who would take his interest in the paranormal into a new and disturbing realm. By 1960, Peter Sellers was a household name. But aware of the fickle nature of fame, he increased his efforts to control his career and his destiny.
With Sellers, he was so insecure, he was so vulnerable, he didn't know who he was from day to day, whether it would work, whether he'd get work. And so he started to rely on soothsayers and people who'd read entrails and tea leaves and all this kind of thing.
Sellers' favourite soothsayer, or clairvoyant, was Maurice Woodruff, the mystic Meg of his day.
Right, Morris is 13th of December 19...
Woodruff exerted a lasting influence on Sellers, one that was to shape the rest of his life.
Maurice Woodruff was a very small man, very neat, overtly gay when it wasn't really permissible to be even remotely gay, and claimed he was the seventh son of a seventh son and was a gypsy, and how much of that was true, I don't know. He was certainly successful as a clairvoyant, whether it was instinct and an ability to anticipate what somebody wanted to hear and kind of work it into a lot of mumbo-jumbo. I simply don't know, but he was successful.
I wasn't enamoured with the gentleman. I always felt that he'd found out about his subjects before he met them, and therefore was could talk about them rather freely.
His style was, he'd be talking as we're talking now, and suddenly he would say some extraordinary thing about you. If he didn't get it right, he would also have an explanation that the reason he didn't get it right is that you're in a holding pattern like an aeroplane or something, he'd always explain, but you are waiting to land, and he got it wrong, but in 6 weeks' time, or maybe it was 6 years' time, it would happen.
Sellers became increasingly dependent on Woodruff's advice. Even when filming abroad, his assistant, Bert Mortimer, contacted Maurice for psychic readings by phone.
He'd sit in his chair at the table, and I'd get Maurice on the phone, and then Maurice would instruct me to tell him what card to lay down, and he would lay them down in sequence as Maurice said. Then I would tell him what they were, then Maurice would give him a reading. And that's how we did it. It was a three-way thing. Me talking to Maurice in England and relaying to Peter wherever we may be.
The professional relationship between Woodruff and Sellers soon became personal. Sellers lent on his new companion as an emotional prop, as much as a clairvoyant.
Maurice certainly had a strength and a confidence and a certainty about himself, which, oddly enough, Sellers lacked. He was never sure about himself. He was never convinced that good things were going to happen. He was always convinced that bad things were going to happen. So he needed somebody in his life to tell him he was great. And once he got that reassurance, he kind of fulfilled the prophecy.
The huge success that Sellers did achieve didn't always sit easily with him. Beneath the trappings of stardom beat the heart of a suburban man.
Mr. Mickey.
Yes, Mr. Martin?
Could you try to find a quarter nib, please?
The trouble with Peter Sellers was that underneath all these Baroque performances that he gave, he was actually rather ordinary and plain and blank. A bit of a Mr. Nobody, really.
He really should have been a bank manager. He had a very bourgeois, ordinary, suburban set of values that was kind of just knocked haywire by being a superstar and a heartthrob and all that. And he couldn't really handle it. He was basically someone who needed to be working 9 to 5 and cleaning his car and playing golf on Saturday.
Now, when he was married to Anne, his first wife, she kept control on that kind of danger in his life. But when he started to get really successful, he divorced Anne, and the control over him began to slip away. He was on his own, and that was madness.
He said at one point in time when he split up with his wife, Anne Levy, and he was in Hampstead all on his own in this enormous penthouse, that he felt like jumping out of the window.
He had everything. He had money, he had a lovely family, lovely home, all he could want, and threw it all away. Blew the whole lot. He had everything, and I think he regretted that later.
But there was one relationship that wasn't as dispensable. As domestic life collapsed around him, Sellers leant all the more heavily on Maurice Woodruff. Major decisions were left in the hands of his clairvoyant.
I think Maurice was always in a very powerful position vis-à-vis Peter's career. For example, he would guide him into certain parts.
Now, Peter has got a very interesting time. Firstly, I think you're going to find he's going to do a film within this coming year, which there will be, the harbour of the film will be a robbery.
He used to ring up my father's agent and say, now then, what are we doing this week? And his agent said, well, I want to make this film and we don't want to do that. So he said, I can see you coming. It's a film with a P, 2 P's, some pink and a jewel. Yes, you know, right.
I don't know whether it's jewels or what it is, but it will be like the old Peter Sellers films, not a clever film, you know, a really funny film.
Eventually, this became a very dodgy area because producers got to hear about Maurice's very strong influence over Peter's way of thinking about what parts he would take. And they got to Maurice and would say, I've got a wonderful part for Peter, you know, if you could happen to mention it next time you're reading The Teacups, you know, it would be great for me, and there's a couple of bob in it for you.
He tells him, you're going to be doing this and this is going to be great for you, and he does it and it's great for him, and then he now believes 100% in Maurice. Once it works, I mean, you're going to come back for more, aren't you, really?
One of Woodruff's most famous predictions was perhaps misinterpreted.
Maurice Woodruff told him he was going to meet somebody with the initials B.E. Now, I was there when he predicted that, and I know it to be a fact.
With the first Pink Panther film in pre-production, the B.E. Woodruff had in mind was the director Blake Edwards. But a chance encounter in early 1964 ushered a very different B.E. into Sellers' life.
Sellers was staying at the Dorchester, and this beautiful girl was checking in, and he looked at her name on her passport. It was Britt Eklund. So I think he probably married her by mistake.
Sellers was married to Britt within a matter of days, and within a few weeks they were living in Los Angeles, where Sellers was working on a film with Billy Wilder. The release of The Pink Panther and Dr. Strangelove within the same month turned Sellers into a Hollywood superstar. And he was married to one of the world's most desirable women. On the surface, life was perfect. Yet even at this peak of success, he couldn't kick his damaging addiction to the paranormal.
He used to have a lot of seances in Los Angeles. He used to have a lot of, and using the Ouija board and that sort of thing. People used to come over and they used to sit and work the Ouija board. And there was a lot of things came up about Jesse James and where all the treasure was buried.
Milligan was wonderfully sceptical about all of that. He said to me once, you know, how is it that when Peter meets all these people who've been reincarnated, you know, they're always the pharaohs, they're always Catherine the Great. You know, he never meets someone who cleaned the toilets in the pyramids.
Newfound stardom did nothing for Sellers' self-confidence. The insecurity that blighted his whole life began to affect his marriage to Britt.
He had this beautiful girl now, married her, and he was convinced that he would lose her because he didn't really believe that anyone like her would want to be with him. So he was obsessed that she was being seduced by her other co-stars here, there and everywhere, and he was mad with jealousy.
Sellers began to use drugs in a desperate attempt to enhance his sexual performance with his younger wife. Heavy use of the stimulant amyl nitrate put a strain on his heart. On April 5th, 1964, Peter Sellers appeared on The Steve Allen Show. This performance was nearly his last. The next day, he woke up with severe pains in his chest.
It was more like a commotion one morning, and then I sort of stumbled out of bed, and there he is being wheeled out on a gurney, out by these. He propped himself up on one arm and said, "Not feeling too good. I've got to go down to the hospital. I'll see you a bit later."
Sellers suffered 8 serious heart attacks and was apparently dead for a minute and a half.
During that period of time that he was in, he had near-death experience, which he told us about. He described them as a tunnel, and at the end of this tunnel there was a light. But he said it wasn't his time. There was a hand stretched out which was pulling him back, saying, "Not yet, Peter, not yet, Peter." He said, and then it brought him back to consciousness.
The telephones just never stopped ringing because the English press got hold of it, and he was such big news that it was almost like the Queen having a heart attack, I suppose.
I was asked to do his obit for the Express. I was very uncomfortable with this, and it was very unprofessional of me, but I found it very difficult to do, and as it happened, we didn't need it because he lived. But afterwards, he said, "Oh, I knew about that. I knew that you didn't have to do it. I was telling you. It was me. I was telling you."
Because I remember there being a sort of large arm. I can only describe it, but if you think of a whole era of blackness, now imagine an arm, bare arm, but a very strong arm, and pulling you for you to hold on to it, an outstretched arm. And you hold this arm says, in its own way, you can feel it saying, "I won't let you go, I won't let you go." And I held on to this arm, and I knew as long as I had that arm that I wouldn't die.
Just read that number plate, please.
NOVAT.
And again, please.
That's no VAT on the Citroën Zara Picasso, Zara Family Hatchback, the Executive Citroën C5, and the new Citroën C8 People Carrier. In fact, no VAT on a range of Citroën cars until September 30th. Citroën, deals to remember.
For incredible holiday packages, visit feelcanada.com today.
After surviving 8 consecutive heart attacks, the insecure Sellers now believed he was invincible. His near-death experience heightened an already obsessive interest in the paranormal.
He did feel, right, I've cheated death now, I'm invincible, because he thought he'd come back with some extra strength, like some science fiction hero.
In a taped interview with his biographer Peter Evans, Sellers claimed to have powers of premonition.
Do you have any premonitions about your life, the possible longevity or lack of it?
Yes, I shall live till I'm 75. And to die in my sleep shortly after that. I knew all the time that I would never die during the Hollywood business.
He believed that. I mean, he absolutely believed that he had nothing to worry about until he was 74, then he should start worrying.
Despite the outward bravado, the shadow of death hung over him for the rest of his life.
I don't know whether his heart affected him in any way mentally. I'm sure it would. But physically, because of his ups and downs, that sort of thing, you could see him during the day, you could see him losing energy. His face would change colour. The blood would drain from it.
Sellers' fragile health worried producers, who were concerned he could be a liability.
In What's New Pussycat, Charles Feldman paid for the insurance of Peter out of his own money because nobody would insure Peter, and Peter thought at that time he would never work in
film Casino Royale.
Charlie Feldman had enormous faith and trust in Peter and gave him his head based on What's New Pussycat. But you never give Peter his head. I mean, Peter would test friendship to destruction.
Feldman cast Sellers as James Bond, with Joe McGrath directing. They needed a heavyweight to cast as Sellers' archenemy in the film.
Peter was the one who had said it would be very good if we could get Orson Welles to play the part of Le Chiffre, who's the crook, you know, in the casino. So Peter wanted that. He said it would be very good if we get that. It'd be wonderful. He used to have Peter Sellers and Orson Welles in the same scene, in the same movie.
But when Orson Welles turned up, Sellers' attitude changed. He was intimidated, not only by Welles' awesome acting reputation, but by his renowned skills as a conjurer.
Orson Welles was a very accomplished conjurer, and he could do all the tricks. But Sellers saw him not as a conjurer, but as a magician. He was terrified that somehow Orson would use his magical powers to destroy his performance, if not himself. He became obsessed with this.
Sellers was gripped by paranoia. Too frightened to appear in the same shot as Welles, he fled the set. After 3 weeks, he was finally tracked down in Switzerland.
They threatened to sue him if he didn't come back. And then he said he would come back, but not if I was in the film, because he was too embarrassed as a friend to come back and work with me.
Joe McGrath wasn't Sellers' only victim during the making of Casino Royale.
Charlie Feldman said, you know, Peter is determined to kill me. He wants to kill me. And a few months after the film was released, and it was a huge flop, Charlie Feldman indeed died. Now, these are strange stories, but they only become relevant or valid or understandable if you see it through the prism of Sellers' own obsession with death and with the occult and with spiritualism. Whether or not Charlie Feldman picked up those vibes from Peter, I don't know, but he was convinced that he would die because Sellers had kind of put a jinx on him.
It's very weird, it's like a sort of curse. People that go out of their way to bring bad things to me have great misfortune in their life. One man just died, suddenly.
Sellers was out of control. He'd derailed one of the most expensive films ever. Casino Royale was released in 1967. It was a critical year. One of Sellers' last restraining influences disappeared. His mother died. From the outset, Sellers and his mother, Peg, had an unusually close relationship. She had lost a baby son the year before Sellers was born.
I think all the baby clothes was still around, kept in tissue paper, or rather morbid, all that. So when our Peter Sellers, as it were, was born, his real name was Richard Henry Sellers. And his mother called him Peter because this was her replacement child.
As her only surviving child, Peg emotionally smothered her son, and even in adulthood, found it hard to let him go.
When he went into the Air Force, so as to be near him, she moved down to the barracks, wherever it was, and she took a bed and breakfast place nearby to be near him. And she'd be at the gates, he said, very embarrassing. She would be actually at the gates, he said, when he came out. Very possessive, Peg.
A very claustrophobic woman. She used to, you have to hug her for half an hour every time you see her. Which was all right, except when she came to school to collect me, and she'd come and stand inside the gate. Couldn't you wait in the car? No, she'd come and stand inside the gate. Give me a hug, my darling. Oh, God.
Sellers' mother had been a potent influence when she was alive. Now dead, she began to exert a greater and more perverse power as her son pursued her through the afterlife.
Whenever you talk about Peter Sellers, you can't talk about him in any informed way without understanding his relationship, not with his living mother, which was a powerful relationship, but with his dead mother. And his dead mother continued to influence him and be with him and obsess him until the day Peter died.
Sellers' interest in second-guessing the future waned. He became fixated with the past. Out went the clairvoyants, including Maurice Woodruff, and in came mediums like Doris Collins, whom he hoped might provide that vital link with his dead mother.
I don't think his mother approved of all his capers, and so she was a restraining influence. And when she wasn't there, in the end, of course he hadn't got anybody to restrain him. So I think that's why he used me, I'm honest, because he thought I could restrain him and say it was his mother, and he believed that.
Where Sellers went, his dead mother went too. He created a shrine to Peg wherever he stayed. But Britt Eklund objected to sharing her bedroom in this way.
Finally, at the end of the marriage, Britt couldn't take it anymore, and she smashed this picture, smashed it into 1,000 pieces. Peter immediately, fell down on his knees and started trying to put it together, weeping at this smashed photograph.
He had this Anthony Perkins in Psycho thing going with his mother. I mean, they were weirdly close. Doubles of each other, actually. There's a split second in The Magic Christian where Sellers is made up as a nun, and he looks just like his mother.
Peter was in the dressing room. Somebody came to me and said, Peter would like to see you. So I went to see him, and he was sitting dressed as the nun. And he was looking in the mirror, and he said, who is it? Who is it, Joe? And I said, it's Peg. He said, yes, it's my mum.
Sellers' obsession with his mother was in part a search for security. He was desperate for the kind of roots that a superstar lifestyle denied him.
He wanted a secure home base. He wanted all those things, ideals that he dreamt of. Yet he as soon as things got sticky, he moved off somewhere else, Well, I've had enough of this, and, the neighbours are crap, so let's move on. Well, let's sell the car, the ashtray's full. I mean, it's move on, you escape.
He's always changing his cars, his cameras, his wives, his girlfriends, everything, every item, every possession was interchangeable and disposable, because no one really existed in the world except for himself.
He desperately needs to be left alone. He needs to be accepted as normal when he knows he's not. He knows the world of films won't allow him to be normal. So I've never seen him light a fire, make a cup of tea, put his slippers on, sit round a fireplace. All those primitive tribal things that give each of us a sense of warmth, they seem to be denied to him. And that's it. He has no fireplace.
It was 3 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang. Hello? I said, it's Pete. It's Pete, Joe. I said, yes. He said, where am I? I said, what's the number on the phone? So he read the number on the phone to me. I said, you're at home. He said, oh, thank God for that, and hung up.
He continued his search for security and inner peace, dabbling in every available 60s cult. For some, it was fashion. For Sellers, it was a mission.
He tried everything, and he was into all that, long hair and beads and the Beatles, all that George Harrison stuff.
There was a point where he went to pray for peace in Ireland with a highly painted aeroplane and some Indian fellow in there, Swami this, that, or the other. I mean, again, I'm maybe I saw most of those guys as charlatans, saying much the same as Wallace Woodruff with a different clothes on. You know, same rubbish, different man.
I think he was an unhappy, miserable sort of man, because I think he'd lost track of who he really was, and all these strange abstracts were the nearest he got to understanding where he was.
In 1969, Sellers married third wife Miranda Quarry. They moved to Ireland as tax exiles to protect Sellers' dwindling fortune. He hadn't made a bankable movie in 5 years.
He was pretty far gone on marijuana most of the time. I think he wasn't in his right mind when he was in Ireland, whatever his right mind was like anyway. He was always wandering back from the hereafter to now and having conversations, as all these boundaries, which normally keep people sane, reality, fantasy, dreams, being awake, life, death, all these other things which for most of us are pretty fixed. Sellers would wander around them all these different states.
He locked himself away in a room once and shaved all his hair off. He cut it all off with scissors and it was all spiky, and he just said he was going through a black period.
Ambipure have created a new perfume, a perfume especially for your car. Ambipure Car, the car air freshener with real perfume.
I now declare the quick draw competition open. You may fire at the first chime of the clock.
Russell Crowe, Leonardo DiCaprio, Sharon Stone, and Gene Hackman. The Quick and the Dead. Saturday at 9:30 on 4.
In 1970, Peter Sellers was living as a tax exile in Ireland. Depressed and out of work, he was again attempting to get in touch with his dead mother and invited over the celebrated spiritualist Estelle Roberts. She brought with her a rather curious companion.
She introduced him to her spirit guide called Red Cloud, who was an Indian chief. Peter was very impressed with this. I mean, the drama of an Indian chief and a spirit guide, I mean, was bound to absolutely captivate Peter's imagination.
She had her guide with her, Red Indian fellow, and he was dressed up in the Indian outfit with the feathers and everything, but physical being, you know, not supernatural. Well, they were nice. They were nice company. They sat down and had a cup of tea and everything, and then they'd go into the séance.
He tried to get through to Peg, but he contacted his dog by mistake, and so he had this séance with the talking dog. Marvellous, really, isn't it?
It was during these séances that Red Cloud opened up a new chapter in Sellers' psychic story.
Red Cloud said that Peter's spirit guide, was a late Victorian musical star called Dan Leno. Peter immediately asked me to find what I could find out about Dan Leno, any books on him and so on, which I duly did.
Evans found Leno's old London home and took an excited Sellers on a visit, much to the surprise of the new owner.
Peter pushed by her and literally fell to his knees in these shorts, saying, "I can feel him, he's here, he's been waiting for me, he's here." Eventually the woman called her husband and we were both evicted from the house, but that was Peter. I mean, it was a classic kind of scene with Sellers.
Jimmy, oh golly, gosh, oh gee, I've fallen in love and so is she. I haven't told her, hasn't told me, but we know it.
Sellers' performance in the film The Optimists of Nine Elms in 1973 was inspired by Leno.
I must admit at the time I thought, well, it's rather fortunate that another performer is your spiritual guide, but again, that's the skeptic in me. But it did influence him. I mean, if you watch it again in that view, almost he's a medium for Dan Leno.
He felt that Dan Leno gave him the inspiration. He came inside him. He said Dan Leno was working him, gave him his talent.
Do you hear a voice that is like you hear my voice?
Yes, absolutely as clear as that. Clear as that. I mean, a clear voice, you know, as if someone's speaking.
I went over to Ireland to see him, and he said, I don't know what I'm going to do. He said, but Dan Leno thinks I should do these Pink Panther films. I said, well, when did you last talk to Dan? You know, as one would. Oh, he said he's coming over all the time. He's very insistent about it. I've got to listen to Dan, you know. Now, either that's a conversation with a madman or a conversation with somebody who genuinely, deeply believes that Dan Leno, who died in 1910 or thereabouts, has gone to Ireland to advise him to play a crazy detective in a Hollywood movie. The fact is, Dan was right.
The return of the Pink Panther in 1974 was a runaway success, re-establishing Sellers as a major Hollywood player. He'd also found a new love. 21-year-old actress Lynn Frederick was about to become his fourth wife. In 1978, Sellers went on to star alongside his new bride in The Prisoner of Zenda. Playing several roles on set complicated his identity crisis off it.
He presents a different person quite a lot of the time. Sometimes he'd come in and be a posh Sellers, and another time he'd come and be a Cockney Sellers or a slightly Poirot or Clouseau kind of Sellers. So he was, even before he got on the set, he was being something different. Sometimes he was being very aloof and he was talking almost like a kind of French aristocrat at you. Oh, hello, Simon, another day like that, coming over, how are you? Would you all that chapter last night, all that stuff. And you think, who are you?
Renewed box office success allowed Sellers to indulge his old superstitious whims on a grand scale.
The Mirisch brothers, at vast expense, had this train brought from the sort of Vienna train museum to the set, and Sellers, a big steam train, and Sellers refused to come on the set because the train was green. So they had to repaint it, and then they had to repaint it again to send it back to the museum. I mean, that's the kind of thing Sellers was doing.
We were doing a scene quite early on in a casino in Vienna, and he said, I can't work with this green tables. It's green, I can't have that. So they had to go around and find some blue gaming tables, because during the sort of wait, the 2-day wait for the tables or whatever it was, he said, I just beg you, Simon, never to wear green. I said, why? He said, just don't wear green. And I've never been able to wear green since.
I mean, that's the incredible thing about Sellers, was that nobody bawled at him to come off it. So they would tear down a set, or they would reshoot or recast, just because of his caprices. I mean, he was like some mad Roman emperor, sort of Caesar Sellers, you know.
Sellers' next film was a project that he'd been trying to get off the ground for 10 years. The character he played in Being There curiously reflected the emptiness of the man himself.
My feeling about Chance was that he hadn't found it a very long journey It was as though the performance was, he might have looked around for a while, but it was right under his nose.
He plays this blank, ordinary nothing of a man who just lives his life by copying bits of behaviour that he's seen on the television screen. A man whose life is just duplicating bits and pieces that he's seen, glimpsed. And that was the real Sellers.
Sellers had drawn on a number of ghosts from his past for the part of Chauncey Gardiner.
He couldn't get Chauncey's walk. And he was struggling with this. And one day, Dan Leno said, "Peter, what you've got to do is to walk this way," and showed him. Now, how he showed him and how that manifested itself, I simply have no idea. But to Peter, it was real.
He identified very closely with that character. If you want to see Peter Sellers, you should, it's a bit of Stan Laurel and a lot of him, really. As his son to watch it, very touching.
The critical acclaim that his performance attracted brought Sellers no closer to resolving the turmoil of his life.
I think he was after inner peace, inner quiet, and he knew that you couldn't buy it. He must have by then, because he'd been trying for a long time. You look at him and some of the things he'd done in his life, some of the horrendous things, not only to us, his children, but to his co-actors and his wives and all that. You know, that man had to get up in the morning, look in the mirror and see that man who did that.
On one occasion, he said to me, "Have you ever looked at yourself in the mirror? Really looked at yourself for a long, long time?" So I said, "Well, how long?" 2 hours, he said. I said, "No, I've never done 2 hours looking at myself." So he said, "Well, I have. Peg used to say, 'No, I mustn't do it. I've got to stop doing it because I'll see the devil if I go on looking.'" I said, "Well, have you ever found the devil?" "Oh, yes," he said. "Oh, yes."
Sellers' relentless search for inner peace had come to nothing. His health failing and his marriage on the rocks, he embarked on one final project, the fiendish plot of Fu Manchu. In a last desperate act of spite, he sacked the director and took over himself.
Can't fool me with a cheap cinematic trick.
I think there were little indications of him, A, being not well physically, and B, being pretty off the wall inside his head, pretty flaky. A good day was great, but a bad day was just horrible.
I shall find you eat.
He stopped us all. We all had to go and have a vitamin B12 injection. He said there's no energy in the scene. It's just not working. And we all had to go and have this wretched vitamin injection. He was as mad as a fucking snake.
How old are you?
168.
Whilst the character of Fu Manchu was searching for the elixir that would give eternal life, Sellers was moving closer to death.
His heart condition got worse, clogged arteries, and he met Christian Barnard, the pioneer of heart transplant, and he said, "No, come on, Peter, come down to Johannesburg, I'll show you how it's done, it's very simple." He said, "Now you sit up here and you watch what I'm going to do," and Dad's there with his camera taking all these pictures. And this is before the micro keyhole, you know, this is when they cut you down here and pulled it apart, and he's looked at all that and he's going, "They're not doing that to me." No way. So we went back to his hotel room, locked himself in, wouldn't come out, and left.
We were talking about his life, and I said, "Well, you know, you're rich, you're successful, you should be happy now." He said, "No, the only time I was really happy was when I lived in Hampstead with his first wife, Anne," and he described the view from the penthouse they had. He said, "You know, I could see West London, I could see Buckingham Palace, I could see the Tower of London, I could see the country. It was the most beautiful view." He said, "I could almost see the past then." And that was kind of the nearest I think he ever got to admitting that maybe that was it, that things were closing in on him.
At the end of his life, and the last time I saw him, I saw an unhappy, used-up man. He was old before his time, white, because of the illness, because of all the drugs he had to take to keep alive. And you can actually see that in Fu Manchu film he made after being there, especially the Nayland Smith character. You can see the face is really thin and hollow, and all the sort of fat's gone out of his flesh. I was sad for him in a way. You know, there was a man who had everything and thought he'd been there and done that and couldn't see that there was anything more. And he was used up, and it was quite sad.
Sellers' obsession with the paranormal not only damaged his career as an actor, but ultimately destroyed his life as a man, wrecking his relationship with his 4 wives and his children. His interest in the other world was a poor substitute for life in the real one. And he finally squandered reality in a desperate search for the unknowable.
Coming up, it's really quite scary as we get a view on Mexican horror movies in Mundo Macabro.